Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear Vyacheslav Viktorovich. Yesterday, on July 6, the spring session of the State Duma ended, and all the deputies I want to emphasize this all the factions made their significant contribution to its overall results. I believe that the results of the work are very worthy, important and significant for people, for the entire Russian state, for protecting our national interests, ensuring the sovereign, sustainable, effective development of the country. This Duma session was eventful, tense and very responsible, given the scale and complexity of the tasks we face. After February 24, when a special military operation began, all branches of government and levels of government in the country needed to act decisively, in concert and quickly. Today I want to thank you for the fact that this is how you worked, collected, competent, at a high pace. I believe that all factions have confirmed their political viability and maturity, acted in a consolidated and cohesive manner, like real statesmen and patriots of Russia, for whom, in difficult conditions, any inter-party disagreements fade into the background. Because we have many parties, but the motherland is one, and there is nothing more important and higher than the fate of the fatherland. A number of decisions and laws have been adopted that seriously strengthen the system of social support for people, aimed at additional protection of citizens. This is not only about the advanced indexation of pensions, which is certainly very important, the increase in the subsistence minimum and the minimum wage. All this was implemented without delay, clearly, competently, but also about new measures to support families with children, extending and expanding the mechanism of preferential mortgages, additional guarantees for our military heroes. There are many other significant decisions. I won't list them all now, you know about this as well as, and maybe even better than me, because you yourself, with your own hands, did all this. I would like to especially note and thank all the parliamentary parties for the organized humanitarian support of the residents of Donbass, namely, all the parliamentary parties, because the media covered this work in different ways, but all, I know this from the incoming information, took and are taking an active part in this. I also know that many deputies, having taken official leave, went to the war zone in order to personally, often at a real risk to their own lives, establish supplies of food, medicines, and essentials at the place of delivery, quickly deploy humanitarian aid centers. Some of your colleagues are still there, working as volunteers. And such initiative, such disinterested help is really needed, in great demand. Separately, I would like to note that, given the rapidly changing situation, the State Duma, together with the government, was constantly fine-tuning a whole range of measures to support the basic sectors of the Russian economy and the workforce of enterprises, including the segment of small and medium-sized businesses, the IT industry, and other critical areas. As a result, we managed to maintain macroeconomic stability, which is extremely important for the economy, to maintain employment, the normal rhythm of retail trade and economic life in the regions in general, the main transport and logistics chains, to expand the freedom of entrepreneurial activity and to strengthen the protection of businesses from excessive administrative pressure and unreasonable criminal persecution. I know that there is still a lot to be done here, but in general, a lot has been done. In a short time, starting from the first days of March, several packages of anti-sanction measures were introduced in close contact with the government. Thanks to them, the consequences of unfriendly, obviously hostile actions of Western countries were minimized. Yes, of course, we understand and know this. We see that these illegal measures against Russia create difficulties for us, an obvious fact, but not at all the ones that the initiators of the economic blitzkrieg against Russia were counting on. Obviously, they were trying not only to hit the Russian economy harder, Their goal was to sow discord and confusion in our society, to demoralize people. But even here they miscalculated, nothing came of it, and I'm sure it won't work. In this regard, the example of the Russian parliament as the highest representative body is indicative. The policy of the parliament is based on the will of the people of Russia, on a firm position, on the conviction that we are historically right, on the indisputable determination of the vast majority of the country's citizens to defend Russia's sovereignty and to help our people in the Donbass. This is what underlies the policy of our state as a whole. The so-called collective West, led by the United States, has been extremely aggressive towards Russia for decades. Our proposals to create a system of equal security in Europe have been rejected. Initiatives for joint work on the problem of missile defense were rejected. Warnings about the unacceptability of NATO expansion, especially at the expense of the former republics of the Soviet Union, are ignored. Even the very idea of Russia's possible integration into this same North Atlantic alliance at the stage of our, as it seemed then, cloudless relations with NATO, apparently, seemed absurd to its members. And why? Yes, because they simply do not need a country like Russia, that's why. That is why they supported terrorism, separatism in Russia, internal destructive forces and the fifth column in our country. All of them received and still receive unconditional support from this very collective West. We are told, we hear today that we started a war in the Donbass, in Ukraine. No, it was unleashed by this very collective West, organizing and supporting an anti-constitutional armed coup in Ukraine in 2014, and then encouraging and justifying genocide against people in the Donbass. This very collective West is the direct instigator, the culprit of what is happening today. If this same West wanted to provoke a conflict in order to move on to a new stage in the fight against Russia, to a new stage in containing our country, then we can say that it succeeded to a certain extent. And the war is unleashed, and sanctions are imposed. Under normal conditions, it would probably be difficult to do this. But what would you like to pay attention to? They should have understood that they have already lost from the very beginning of our special military operation, because its beginning also means the beginning of a radical breakdown of the American world order. This is the beginning of the transition from liberal globalist American egocentrism to a truly multipolar world, a world based not on selfish rules invented by someone for themselves, behind which there is nothing but the desire for hegemony, not on hypocritical double standards, but on international law, on the true sovereignty of peoples and civilizations, on their will to live their historical destiny, their values and traditions, and build cooperation on the basis of democracy, justice and equality. And we must understand that this process can no longer be stopped. The course of history is inexorable, and the attempts of the collective West to impose its new world order on the world, these attempts are doomed to failure. At the same time, I want to say and emphasize, we have many supporters, including in the United States itself, and in Europe, and even more so on other continents and in other countries, and there will be more and more of them, there is no doubt about it. I repeat, even in countries that are still satellites of the United States, there is a growing understanding that the blind obedience of their ruling elites to their overlord, as a rule, does not correspond to their national interests, and most often simply radically contradicts them. With the growth of these sentiments in society, in the end everyone will have to reckon. Today, these ruling elites are raising the degree of manipulation of public consciousness before our eyes. The ruling classes of Western countries, supranational and globalist in nature, realizing that their policy is increasingly divorced from reality, from common sense, from the truth, began to use frankly despotic methods. The West, which once declared such principles of democracy as freedom of speech, pluralism, respect for other opinions, today is degenerating into the exact opposite, into totalitarianism. Includes censorship, closure of the media, arbitrariness against journalists, public figures. This practice of prohibitions extends not only to the information space, but also to politics, culture, education, art, to all spheres of public life in Western countries. Moreover, they impose such a model of totalitarian liberalism, including the notorious culture of abolition, widespread prohibitions, they are trying to impose on the whole world. But the truth and reality is that the peoples of most countries do not want such a life and such a future, but really strive not for formal, decorative, but for substantive, real sovereignty, and are simply tired of kneeling, humiliating themselves in front of those who consider themselves exceptional, yes, and to the detriment of themselves to serve their interests. Today we hear that they want to defeat us on the battlefield. Well, what can I say? Let them try. We have already heard a lot that the West wants to fight with us to the last Ukrainian. This is a tragedy for the Ukrainian people, but it seems that everything is heading towards this. But everyone should know that, by and large, we have not started anything seriously yet. At the same time, we do not refuse peace negotiations, but those who refuse should know that the further, the more difficult it will be for them to negotiate with us. Dear colleagues, the patriotic state approach is fully reflected in the work of the State Duma, in fact, determines the entire legislative, political agenda. This is how it should be in a democratic and truly independent state. I am convinced that for the leading parties of Russia, the concern for the welfare of our country and our people, for the people who delegated, entrusted you with their vote, endowed you with the high status of a legislator and expect honest, conscientious service from the deputy corps, the adoption of effective, fair, deeply thought-out legislative acts. It is the people who will give their objective assessment of each party, including in September, during the next elections to regional and municipal authorities. I hope that the pre-election competition will not harm the joint partnership activities in the State Duma of the current, 8th convocation. Thanks a lot for your attention. Please, I give you the floor. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich. Dear colleagues. Vladimir Vladimirovich, I want to express my gratitude that, despite the busy schedule, you always pay attention to the agenda of the State Duma, and we can always discuss it with you, just as we are now at this round table. But I want to start, I think my colleagues will support me, by expressing gratitude from all deputies for the decision to recognize both the Donetsk Republic and Luhansk People's Republic as independent, as well as the decision to launch a special military operation. We all believe that this prevented a humanitarian catastrophe, the death of a huge number of people, if not for these decisions. And of course, today, when it comes to the work of the State Duma, we first of all consider it our duty and priority to do everything possible for our soldiers and officers, provide their families with care, attention and, of course, within our capabilities, create a legislative field that allows us to overcome challenges faced by our country. 11,160 sanctions have been announced against Russia. No state has faced so many challenges. So for all of us, this is the moment of truth. We must treat our work differently, and, as you rightly said, we have one party today, this is our country. The interests of the motherland must be above all party programs, and we are trying to follow this. Since January, 361 laws have been adopted. 35% of this number are socially significant laws. This is more than in previous years. Despite the fact that we have to transfer powers to the government for efficiency, there is no other way in this situation. The number of laws of direct action is growing. This is the task that you have set for the State Duma. Today, 63.4% of the total volume of adopted laws are laws of direct action. They are, of course, more effective at solving people's problems. And, of course, during the discussion, everyone can see what is accepted. This improves the quality of decisions made. Therefore, it is extremely important for us to do everything to ensure that the State Duma makes effective decisions that are in line with today's times. We are approaching summer holidays, work in the regions. We plan to approach the organization of our work in a slightly different way than before. On the one hand, we will try to pay as much attention to our constituents as possible, working in the districts and solving the problems that people face. On the other hand, spend the summer time in order to prepare for the autumn session, working together with the government on draft laws in the field of import substitution and the creation of new domestic technologies. And, of course, given the problems and the situation on the territory of our fraternal republics, Luhansk and Donetsk, taking into account the appeals of our fellow deputies, we agreed that we would help them create a legal framework within which issues of healthcare, education, social protection. They came to us just a few weeks ago, and we discussed just the issues of joint work within the relevant committees, so that such assistance would be provided in the formation of legislation by the preparation of model laws, harmonization of legislation, so that they would fully provide themselves with a legal framework for resolving these issues. Therefore, this summer will be very responsible for us. We believe that it is necessary here, based on the challenges of the time, to restructure the work, and we plan to do this together with all the factions and relevant committees from Monday, when the deputies go to the regions. Once again, I would like to say thank you, Vladimir Vladimirovich, for the decisions that were made. We feel dialogue, feedback. Of course, your support is extremely important to us. Thank you. Thank you, Vyacheslav Viktorovich. Please, Gennady Andreevich, Communist Party. Vladimir Vladimirovich. This composition of the Duma began with the parting words you expressed here in the Kremlin Palace. I would like to draw your attention to your message. It contains 5 main theses that the country must achieve. First of all, to enter the top 5 most developed countries, and for this we have everything necessary to stop extinction, impoverishment, and do everything to break through into the latest technology. But out of 10 months, 4 months we are forced to live in the conditions of a military-political operation, which is extremely important from all points of view. We fully support this decision of yours, because we are talking about the struggle to preserve the Russian world. We are talking about stopping American globalism, which is trying to dictate its terms to everyone, and everything must be done so that Nazism and Banderism do not spread throughout Europe. Last time, when fascism engulfed the whole of Europe, mankind paid 71 million lives for this, 27 of which were the best sons and daughters of the great Soviet country. I made a special trip to the St. Petersburg Forum, listened attentively to your speech, wrote down 26 theses, and probably for the first time felt that we had no disagreements on any of the questions you raised. I noticed even earlier, when you spoke at the Valdai Club, You said, yes, capitalism has reached a dead end. Macron even more harshly declared that he had lost his mind. How crazy he is, we see today in the citadel of capitalism, the same England, and we must do everything to ensure that these people, who not only go crazy, but decide to continue to dictate their terms, do not set fire to a big war. In this regard, our team prepared a winning program, 12 laws, a development budget and did everything to formulate key measures and show in practice that these problems can be successfully solved. As for the military-political operation, we have always called for the recognition of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics, Crimea and Sevastopol. I must inform you, the Executive Committee of the Left-Wing Patriotic Forces met today, every one of the 132 organizations on the planet that celebrated the anniversary of the Great October Revolution with us and are now preparing for the 100th anniversary of the formation of the USSR, all supported our political line. We believe that this is a common victory. In general, I have talked with you more than once and I am very pleased that you have strengthened our eastern flank, your trip to Beijing, to India and constant consultations within the Brooks framework, an attempt to expand this organization. This very powerful counterbalance to the Anglo-Saxon idea of AA crushing us and further cracking down on China is gaining more and more support. I am sure that if you prepare a decree, I think my comrades and colleagues in the Duma will support us. We should celebrate the 100th anniversary of the formation of the USSR as a great national holiday, because then we gave the first battle to those aggressors who tried to enslave and destroy us. It seems to me that today the issue of tougher mobilization of resources for the implementation of the program that you have outlined is ripe. We have the tools for this. We have a well-prepared program for new industrialization and innovation. I presented to you the program of the new university, which was created by Zrazalfarov and which today shows examples of training the children of the future. Now we all watched your meeting with the new leaders. Look, what faces, what interesting guys, what glorious ideas. After all, they are born everywhere, and in this regard, we are ready to actively promote this idea in Novosibirsk, developing the second phase of Akadgorodok. You were there and authorized. Our Mayor Lockhart took up this idea. In our team, including Melnikov, in this faction every third has an academic degree, and in the leadership of the party, every second. The idea of AI, the latest modern technology, is well supported by Mustin. He additionally allocated 100 billion for the development of electronics and robotics. And now for us the task of developing domestic aviation acquires a special meaning. We prepared the new Virgin Land program, you submitted it to the State Council, and Kashin, together with Karatanov, together with Kolomyites, worked out this program. Over the past 2 years, we have added 28% in the field of agricultural engineering. This is after you, at the State Council, gave, in fact, a direct instruction to the government. I believe that we can implement this topic very effectively. Your famous Kirov factory. I went, the Germans came, they drooled, seeing how quickly we localized and produced, without any foreign help, modern cars of the highest class. In Tatarstan tomorrow or the day after tomorrow we will hold a big holiday of people's friendship. There we took a people's enterprise like Lenin State Farm and Grudensk, Kazankovsku. There we will show 100 types of domestically produced equipment and show how it is possible to work in modern conditions without raising prices and producing superclass food-type products. I believe that if we promote this idea throughout the country and create at least one people's enterprise in each region, we will fill our markets with cheap products of the highest quality, and our food will be a litmus test, our priority. By the way, you have set the task of harvesting 130 million tons of grain this year. I think it is an absolutely realistic task if my colleagues still actively support the new Virgin Lands program in the 3-year budget, which we have already started working on. Well, the new style, what is it, your idea, but reached a dead end. The capitalist has not just reached a dead end, he is really furious today, but there is only one antidote, because capitalism always gives rise to Nazism, fascism and banderism, and there is no one to defeat it except socialism. Therefore, I expect that in your next speech you will set socialist tasks. And I think even United Russia will actively support it. Volodin sits next to him and smiles, he already likes this idea. He holds big hearings on the main issues in the Duma. Recently it was brilliant, in terms of education. We are ready to put our law on education for all into practice. And look, Klitschkov last time was supported by me in the Ural region. I thank you. For me it is a matter of principle. My Ural land is all tormented, 800 mass graves, more than 400,000 of the best sons are buried, who broke the backbone of the fascist beast on the Ural-Kursk Bulge. This year, Orlovshchina is mine, it is not black earth, it will produce 6 tons of grain per person. 6 tons will be the best harvest in our country. They waited for Klitschkov and Kakasa, we doubled the budget in 3 years, the only Siberian region. And even those who are called oligarchs are happy to pay taxes. They say they don't steal, they do business, they support people, they encourage the children of war. By the way, 44 regions have already adopted a law on children of war. I hope that you will support other regions as well. This topic is long overdue. Together with our Chinese friends, we are organizing a red route in Ulyanovsk. This year they have the 20th Congress, they are thinking over a program for 30 years ahead. It will be 10-12 million, this is a big income. We are completing the reconstruction of the Lenin Center there, and an excellent program for the latest technologies and the development of aviation technology. So our faction in this regard will actively support all the main tasks. But above all, support the special operation as much as possible. We sent 97 convoys to Donbass, 15,000 tons. We help children as much as we can. In your holiday home in Snagite Hurry, 10.5 thousand children were taken in. Now we are actively preparing the next batch of support. I must say that your administration is working very closely there now. We have a lot of interesting personnel there who have gone through a good school of production, hardening and are absolutely pro-Russian, because the fight against Russophobia today takes on a special meaning. But the most vicious Russophobes are anti-Soviet. A big request to you, we have already expressed this point of view, unfortunately, in our culture and in the media, anti-Sovietism is simply heaped up, we need to stop it. This is a complete disgrace, because, apart from the experience of Russian-Soviet patriotism and victory over fascism, humanity has no other experience. For us, this is of fundamental importance. In this regard, I once again appeal to you to return to that note, including on the amnesty of some of our comrades who were punished. I think it's illegal. instruct us once again to return together with Vaino and Kirienko. We'll find solutions, they're practically lined up. And so, now the main issue is the rallying of society and support. We will support your message, your line on strengthening the security of the country, on unity in action in the fight against Nazism, Bandera and American globalism. It is a matter of principle and of our historical survival. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have no doubts that the members of the Communist Party of the Russian Federation are configured in this way. As for the socialist idea, there is nothing wrong with it. The question of filling is what to fill, especially in the economic sphere. In some countries, there is content, and it is connected and intertwined with market forms of regulation, and so on. Works quite effectively. Must watch. As for the participation of the state, this is where the dispute, as a rule, lies. Here the question is also where, to what extent the state should participate, in what form, how the state should regulate its activities in the economic sphere. We will, of course, decide all this in the course of discussions, in the course of disputes. I proceed from the fact that if we understand that the main interests are people, the interests of the country, we will find these outcomes. Thanks a lot. Please, Slutsky Leonid Dadyurdovich. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich. On April 6, we and not only us, the LDPR party, the country, the entire Russian world suffered an irreparable loss. The founder and permanent leader of the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, Vladimir Wolfovich Zhirinovsky, passed away. Thank you very much for your condolences. Today I meet you for the first time in a new capacity. Thank you very much for agreeing to a short separate meeting. I will report to you the consolidated request of the chairman of the State Duma and all leaders of factions, parliamentary parties to perpetuate the memory of Vladimir Wolfovich. This, we believe, is extremely important today for our society, for those who remember Vladimir Wolfovich, a great man whose forecasts and assessments, as we see, come true and, probably, will come true in the foreseeable future. Thank you, Vladimir Vladimirovich, for trusting me personally to enter the top 4 negotiators on Ukraine. You repeated today what I have said repeatedly and most recently to our counterparts in Kiev. We agreed, it would seem, on the entire humanitarian bloc, with the exception, however, of the law on heroes. They did not want to hand over Bandera and Shukovich. But they rolled back, unfortunately, to their original positions. I have repeatedly said that it will be more difficult, much more difficult. As for the LDPR party, I am grateful for the support of 300,000 of our party members, there are actually a little more of them, who supported me at the Congress. The delegates from all branches voted unanimously for me as the chairman of the party. This is a huge responsibility. For us, this session, of course, is very difficult, but effective. It was indicated by the fact that we submitted several dozen bills, several of which have already been adopted, on the payment of the 13th pension to pensioners, on the return of indexation of pensions to working pensioners, on raising the minimum wage to 20,000 rubles, on zeroing the tax for individuals those who receive less than 2 times the minimum wage, on a progressive scale of taxation, on compensation for veterans of military operations 50% of the cost of housing and communal services, and much more. Today, I must say, we do not have time for party contradictions. Today is the time to consolidate society and unite, erase, and not draw dividing lines between political forces in order to support the national economy and the social sphere. There is no doubt that the sanctions and restrictions that are directed against us will choke. They have already choked. 2 years ago, as chairman of the International Committee of the State Duma, I appealed to the sane politicians of the world with a call to completely abandon sanctions and restrictions as a rudiment, atavism, archaism in today's politics. More than 60 leaders of states and the Secretary-General of the United Nations, he was recently in Moscow, Antonio Guterres, with whom we are now actively discussing Ukraine, responded to me with support for this thesis. But we see the opposite happening. At the same time, you are absolutely right that today the reverse process has begun. European politicians, including on the platform of the European Parliament, and almost all without exception, I say without too much pathos, and absolutely all European countries without exception, in Asia, in Africa, Latin America, more and more politicians, public figures, representatives of the university community, scientists talk about the dislocation of the approaches that are being applied today to Russia and threaten the stability of the world architecture, which should now be formed, in these years, precisely as stable and safe. We proceed from the premise that the world order should remain only multipolar, as it was determined following the results of the Second World War, when the United Nations was created with its leading role. At the same time, Washington does not abandon attempts to crack the Security Council from within. Unfortunately, for a number of dossiers this has already happened. I am sure that we will be able to achieve with those colleagues who support us in the world. This includes the BRICS countries, about a third of the world's gross domestic product. They are against a unipolar world where Washington will be the only pole of power. No matter who and no matter how desperately clung to our, as I call them, strategic friends in the West, nothing will come of it. I would like to support your theses in this regard. The LDPR party unanimously supported, people of different ages, religions, from different regions, a special military operation in Ukraine. We have large teams of volunteers. Of course, we also provide humanitarian assistance. I will report on some things to you at a separate meeting. I must say that now there is nothing more important than helping these courageous people who for 8 years took on shells with inscriptions "Children of Donbas" just to remain a part of the Russian world and continue to speak and teach children in their native language for many generations and their families in Russian. Now, dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, the positions you took 10 years ago, in 2012, are more relevant than ever. This was repeatedly quoted by Vladimir Wolfowitz in various speeches. At that time, you came up with the program article "Russia and the Changing World," where you said that we must significantly increase our cultural and humanitarian presence in the world and increase it by an order of magnitude where they speak Russian or understand Russian. This has not been completed. Today we are appealing to the government so that the relevant federal programs to support the Russian world, its cementing foundation, the fundamental basis, the Russian language, be supported at a qualitatively different level. I am sure that this will work, although we are moving towards this goal rather slowly. Now it is precisely the situation when it makes sense, perhaps, to work much more forcefully in this direction. Then, in 2012, you came up with another program article, and we also supported it then and in subsequent years. It's called Social Policy. Building Justice for Russia. There is a wonderful section Saving Russia. You wrote, Vladimir Vladimirovich, that if our national, migration and demographic policies developed somewhat sluggishly, as they did at that time. We have a sixth of the land, but only 2% of the world's population, run the risk of becoming, I quote verbatim, into an empty space, the fate of which will not be decided by us. Of course it won't. But we need now to host those thousands of people. This was also discussed at the last World Congresses of our compatriots who are registered with our foreign missions and who are ready to return. It is necessary to create clusters with excellent health care, education, we can afford it, with jobs and take our people back, for this is the time. Now the spirit of the street. George Ribbon, which is simply in the air over the entire Russian world. No matter how far people live from Moscow, their desire to return home must be supported. To do this, it is necessary to take certain measures that have long been developed. It is simply necessary to strengthen the relevant federal departments in some way with instruments of state support. We cannot be taken by any war, by any of the most modern weapons. We are the most combat-ready, without unnecessary pathos, power on the planet. But we can be taken by weakening the education of our youth. In 1999, we set upon ourselves a not entirely successful experiment with the baloney system. We entered it quickly, but we need to exit it very gradually. We really, thanks to Vyacheslav Viktorovich, our speaker, held fundamental parliamentary hearings. Viktor Antonovich Sadovnichny, the rector of Moscow University, our living legend, also spoke. I have the honor on a voluntary basis to lead him as president of the Faculty of World Politics. I must say that we need to seriously move in this direction and recreate the best education system in the world, where representatives of political and business elites in more than 100 countries of the world were educated. It won't take that long. Work in this direction has begun, and I would like to report to you and ask for support. There is nothing more important than the comprehensive education of those who come to replace us. Thank you very much for the initiative and all-round support for the Sirius Center. Now it is not only a center, but the Sirius territory. But this is only one slice of what needs to be done in this direction. We will work as an LDPR party, as a parliamentary faction in close cooperation, as we are working now, with other parties to solve the tasks that are on the agenda today. Forced work is paramount today on issues of strengthening the national economy, the social sphere, and on national projects. I would like to thank the government for closer and more effective cooperation with the State Duma than ever before. We are a party of constructive opposition and are ready for the most coordinated work in our difficult time. We have a very, very serious responsibility. So thank you very much for the importance you attach to today's parliamentarism. We continue to work. Thanks a lot. Thank you. You began your speech with words dedicated to Zhirinovsky Vladimir Wolfovich. I cannot but agree with you that Vladimir Wolfovich was not just an outstanding political figure in our country, but a very versatile person, with such great, deep knowledge. Hence some of his prophecies that come true. They are not out of nowhere, they are not built on playing cards, but on knowledge, on understanding the development of the situation, on the prospects for the development of these situations. But what is most important is that Vladimir Wolfovich, of course, was a patriot of Russia. This is a completely obvious thing. And all his activities were built precisely on this soil, on this platform. They also say that the Liberal Democratic Party has always been a party of one man and one leader. I proceed from the fact that the party has its own ideological platform. Of course, Leonid Eduardovich, it will not be easy for you, because, well, to be honest, you have to talk about it directly. Everyone will compare your style of work with the style of Vladimir Wolfovich. I know that you have your own style. Style is style, but the general approach associated with everything related to the interests of Russia remains unchanged. This is extremely important. I would like to wish you every success in your work. We will discuss the details during our bilateral meeting. Thank you. Please, Mironov Sergei Mikhailovich. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich. First of all, thank you for continuing the good tradition of accepting the leadership of the State Duma and faction leaders after the session. Thank you for appreciating the work of the State Duma. Indeed, with regard to legislative support, anti-sanction struggle and the conduct of a special military operation, all factions of the State Duma are united. Several proposals, brief theses. I'll start with those issues that are connected with the conduct of a special military operation. Our faction has submitted a bill to equate the People's Militia of the DPR and LPR and all militias in terms of status to our servicemen, in terms of social protection, in terms of material support, and in the future as combat veterans. Here, I consider it very important for the border guards who serve in the Belgorod, Kursk, Bryansk, Voronezh and Rostov regions to do the same, because in fact they are real participants in a special military operation. The integration process is underway, and there is a lot of work to be done. I think that if a special agency or commission were created to coordinate the activities of all ministries that will now be engaged in integration processes for the entry of new subjects of the Federation into Russia, this would probably be correct. I reported to you on the situation in the Kharkiv region, in particular in the city of Izum. I cannot but say a word of gratitude to Sergei Vladimirovich Kuryenko, who visited these cities and found out the problems on the spot. There is a proposal to include in your decree of April 24 on a simplified procedure for the admission of citizens of Ukraine to the citizenship of the Russian Federation residents of the Kharkiv region. As far as customs regulation is concerned, I also reported to you that certain measures have been taken. But we have introduced a special bill that introduces a customs regime for goods transported across the Russian border on the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic, the Lugansk People's Republic and Ukraine as a whole, similar to the customs regime with the countries of the Eurasian Economic Union. On July 1, dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, as has traditionally been since 2009, war veterans have gathered on Poklanaya Hill. These are veterans from before Afghanistan. As we know, there was also Korea, there was Algeria, Egypt, Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, Angola, Ethiopia, Syria. After Afghanistan, there was Yugoslavia, Georgia, the republics of the former Soviet Union, and Tajikistan, and Karabakh, and again Syria. Now a special military operation. There is a proposal I am passing this on from Combat Veterans Day to make July 1 officially the Day of Combat Veterans, so that this date would be on the holiday calendar. Now there are a few unresolved problems and questions on the socio-economic issues of our country, our citizens. You gave instructions, and Leonid Eduardovich mentioned this, that the government should still think about indexing working pensioners. While there is no solution, working pensioners, about 7 million, are looking forward to it. Price containment. You set such a goal for both food and medicines. There are specific proposals. By the way, according to everything I am talking about, the relevant legislative initiatives have been submitted by our faction. At one time, we made a great decision on retail chains. We cancelled the so-called marketing fee, and immediately prices stabilized a bit. Now in pharmacies, unfortunately, the same story. Drug suppliers are forced to pay this marketing fee, which, of course, is included in the price of drugs. People can't afford it right now. There is a proposal to reduce the value-added tax on socially important food products, children's products, medicines and books to 5%. The maximum allowable share of citizens' own expenses for housing and communal services, we raise this question. The general federal norm is 22%, in Moscow it is 10%, in many subjects of the Federation it is even 15%, various other figures. There is still a proposal to make a federal norm so that people spend no more than 15% on housing and communal services. We worked with the Ministry of Finance, we calculated, 25.5 billion rubles are required. There is a proposal to create a so-called alimony fund. I think that any deputy present here receives a huge mail, and, as a rule, these are women. They cannot find unfortunate fathers who run away, do not pay alimony, there is nothing to support the child. A proposal, there is a corresponding legislative initiative. In such cases, let the state pay average alimony. It is easier for the state to find the debtor later, than take him by the scruff of the neck and demand everything that is necessary so that women and children do not suffer. And there is another suggestion. Thank you for introducing the first progressive personal income tax scale on January 1, 2021. Those who receive more than 5 million rubles pay 15%. I will name the figures. The Ministry of Finance planned to raise 60 billion rubles, but they collected 82.5 billion rubles, which is 30% more. There are reserves. We have submitted a bill. Those who receive more than 50 million rubles a year, so that they pay 18%, and those who receive, unfortunately, have salaries below the minimum wage, so that they are generally exempted from paying income tax. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, at the end of the meeting, I ask you to accept me literally for a short conversation. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for your proposals. As for equating the servicemen of the LPR and DPR with Russian servicemen, I fully support this. Moreover, in practice this is being implemented. If there are still some things that are not developed, you need to look at it. We will definitely do it. The same applies to our border guards. The Federal Security Service came up with such a proposal, and I agree with that. Let's talk about other issues too. Thanks a lot. Please, Nikolaev Alexei Genadevich. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich. From the first day I support your decision on a special military operation in Ukraine, and I think that it is dictated not only by concern for the inhabitants of Donbass, citizens of Russia, but this decision returns Russia its place in history, a country, a people that shows other countries and peoples what is real sovereignty, what is real freedom in the modern world, and thereby changes this world itself. Sovereignty in all spheres, socio-political, military, and economic. Now we see, despite the difficulties that were especially in the first months, that in general, my comrades, industrialists tell me, many chains have already been restored, the situation has become stronger, and people are thinking that there are new opportunities, thinking about development. Although the era of capitalism is ending, capital itself remains. People thought about long money. Together with the Ministry of Industry and Trade and the Russian Direct Investment Fund, we are now preparing package solutions for financing high-quality, medium-sized Russian companies. Our DIF funds will be used for their development and will be able to be invested both in the form of convertible loans and direct capital contributions. The first few pilot projects have already been selected. One of them is the production of kitchen utensils. The company has been developing without any additional funding. But now it is clear that they have made the model that in the next year or two the company will be able to make the same breakthrough in the market, both domestic and foreign, as in 5 years, if it develops without capital. There are many such examples. I think that if this idea is accelerated, and you support such medium-sized companies, then the Ministry of Industry and Trade and UDIF will hear such a signal. But, of course, we see, and you, of course, know that the elites of the Anglo-Saxon countries have introduced protective duties of up to 35% on our Russian goods, giving a damn about the agreements that were previously reached at the WTO. We have not yet responded to these countries. Perhaps it is time to introduce mirror duties. This is a long procedure. Because we are members of the Eurasian Economic Community, it will be necessary to coordinate this, but, as they say, we will start earlier, maybe we will introduce it earlier. There are also such things as, for example, Poland. Poland simply took away business, property, goods, money from about 50 of our companies, you know this well. But it is interesting that simultaneously with the official part of such attacks on us, such pirate robbery, they also introduced unofficial ones. There are also several companies that sold their goods well in Poland. All networks refuse them, do not pay for already delivered goods. Piracy occurs not only at the state level, but also at the level of economic entities. This is probably some kind of Anglo-Saxon DNA and also settled in Poland. Interestingly, Poland is a country where the production sites of many transnational corporations from unfriendly countries are located. This is the place where they produce goods for the entire CIS, for Eastern Europe, as Gleb Zeglov would say. They have a rookery of these production sites, TNK. Let's perhaps introduce an embargo on goods produced in Poland for those product groups that are also produced in Russia. We are also ready to prepare such a list with the Ministry of Industry and Trade and other relevant ministries, if in general the time for this idea has come or, perhaps, will come soon. Our companies are now prepared, ready to respond. Vladimir Vladimirovich, thank you very much for your speech at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. She inspired a lot of people. You also spoke about the need to give more freedom to entrepreneurs and reduce the number of criminal cases under economic articles. For more than 10 years, we have not changed the parameters for determining the transition from administrative to criminal liability, depending on the amount of damage. No one says what is needed. I am not suggesting that we should be irresponsible, but in a number of cases there are absurdities. For example, Article 180 of the Criminal Code on counterfeiting. In it, large-scale damage implies both fines and correctional labor for up to 2 years, forced labor for up to 2 years, and imprisonment for up to 2 years with a fine. At the same time, large damage for this article is 250,000 rubles. This is really money, but maybe we can already index it here, or maybe look at it in general under the new conditions. After all, more than 250,000 rubles, damage, is probably already from some past life. Of course, no one is talking about irresponsibility, there is simply an administrative form, it may be sufficient. Back in May, we prepared the relevant bill, received a positive review from the Supreme Court, and have been waiting for a response from the government since May 19. So far there is no answer. This solution does not require additional budget expenditures. On the contrary, it will make it possible to unload the pretrial detention center, if necessary, and will add confidence to many people in the future, especially conscientious people who have made a mistake in some way. We are not afraid to make mistakes, and it is better to bear administrative responsibility than criminal. I ask you to instruct to expedite this decision. Maybe the government will also remember that you said this at SPEF. Vladimir Vladimirovich, last fall I told you about the plans to create an all-Russian youth educational program. I'm in business as this has been done. For half a year it has been operating in 62 regions of Russia. We have trained 10,000 students during these 6 months, and we will train another 40,000 in the second half of the year. Next year, we plan to cover about 200,000 university students and about 300,000 more college students and school children. Both the Ministry of Education and Science and Rosmerlodes are actively helping us in the implementation of this program. Together with them we are planning to hold a major all-Russian educational forum in one of the regions in November. Discuss Tomsk or Yekaterinburg. We invite you to take part in this forum in the form that will be convenient for you, in person, in absentia, because your attitude to what they are doing is very important for young people. They are building their business here, in Russia, and, of course, they are waiting for support and blessings. We are not going to be limited only to Russia. Recently, meetings were held with representatives of the parliaments of the DPR and LPR. We agreed with them on cooperation, including in the educational sphere, and agreed to include young people from these republics in the I'm in Business program. They also need young people with burning eyes, those who will equip the future peaceful life. We will support them. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your suggestions. Please, Vladimir Abdulevich. Thank you very much, Vladimir Vladimirovich, for the opportunity. I, like my colleagues, highly appreciate our meeting today. Literally yesterday, summing up the work of the parliament, Gennady Andreevich spoke about some issues, and today they were raised by colleagues, which we assess differently. You mentioned just then that we have such a wonderful opportunity to meet with you and discuss these issues, listening to each other, your position. I listen attentively to my colleagues and would like to start by saying that you once said that our people define justice in an amazing way and make the right decisions. When there were elections to this parliament, there were no events that we are talking about today, but even then people made the absolutely right decision. And today the composition of the parliament has shown that it has passed the test for political maturity in this very difficult situation. Decisions were made that allowed both the launch of a special military political operation and the adoption of legal decisions on the recognition of the republics of Donbass, which, as we all state, has changed today's geopolitics around the world, not to mention what is happening in our country. Colleagues have also spoken about this, and I can only agree and support. We have a huge potential, and today my comrades spoke about it, in particular, Gennady Andreevich. He named such examples, referred to them, that we could take such big steps forward. In particular, for example, new virgin land. First, what has been done in the agricultural sector is respected. And today we are headed by a committee. The chairman of the committee is a representative of the Communist Party. By the way, on the other hand, our leader Gordeev, who has extensive experience in this area, is also involved in this work. I believe that such joint work with the government, by the way, primarily with which we are constantly in communication, and with the minister, and with the prime minister, we can come up with precisely those solutions that will be effective, that will not destroy what has been achieved, and will help us move towards those goals that, perhaps, while we are dreaming, but which have not yet been created as models and which have not yet shown themselves in these conditions, and everyone recognize that unprecedented sanctions, pressure, the constant change of the situation. Here today, by the way, this is probably a very important issue, and this discussion could probably be continued, because the Prime Minister and his First Deputy touched on the topic, the model of what the economic model of our country will be like. Gennady Andreevich sees her like this. We see how we are talking and cooperating with the government that our economy should change from a catch-up and import-substituting development economy that is moving forward. We understand that in the current situation, it is clear that it will not be necessary and is not necessary to introduce a mobilization economy. On the other hand, we literally recently considered and adopted these methods of mobilization economy in a number of directions. In this regard, the proposal that the chairman spoke about, that this should be a matter that, when faced with problems, solves them in a balanced way, tests where possible, on some practices that exist, and in areas of activity, and in the regions, and in the best pilot projects. Today we talked about the fact that there is a lot of training for modern managerial personnel. All this, it seems to me, taking into account our rich representation of political parties in Parliament and sometimes different approaches to solving the most complex problems, today this allows our faction, which is the faction of the majority. By the way, I want to thank you for the fact that at the first meeting, as we all remember, you made a proposal not to divide by the number of votes, but to compare them so that all voters could see the representatives in Parliament. This turned out to be a very prophetic decision, especially when the question arose and when the deputies began to make such vital, fateful decisions for the country and for the inhabitants of our country. I think it worked out. Today, when we also touch on some issues of cooperation, I believe, issues of responsibility of all to one people. You very correctly said, there are many parties, there is one motherland. Therefore, this is a very powerful potential that today provides a solution to problems, a way out of the most difficult situations and, most importantly, will allow us, I am convinced of this, to solve all the problems that my comrades spoke about and which, of course, there are and will be. I would also like to say that, of course, we, like our colleagues, are working together here. Vyacheslav Viktorovich said how many laws were adopted. Somewhere around 50% were contributed by our colleagues. But the rest were submitted by colleagues from other factions, and we voted on them practically in a consolidated way, when it concerned the interests of the people, when it concerned the interests of the country, when it concerned your policy. You should also hear and know this, we talk about it all the time, even when we disagree on something. Today, Gennady Andreevich emphasized once again that he does not question what he hears from our president. This is very important, as well as other factions. And there is huge potential here. We worked, of course, I will not go into details, colleagues have spoken about this and will add, this is support for combat veterans and their families, expanding the categories that are granted the status of a combat veteran. I support the proposal of my colleague, yours, Sergei Mikhailovich. You held a wonderful exhibition on war veterans, it was an event. Thank you for that. And of course, you need to think about this memorable date as much as possible. I understand that we all support this issue. We had such an unprecedented, perhaps in terms of scale, hearing in the Duma dedicated to education that was very important. The first thing that was done in the hall, it was, in fact, voted in the presence of both the leaders of the faction and our colleagues, the transition from the definition of service to a more professional definition. And the same is expected of us now medicine. We also ask, I think this is our common position, to support and resolve these issues in the near future. Import promotion. We also support this in every possible way, we solve problems. And what I would like to draw attention to, since last year, and I recently received a reminder from Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev that we did not fulfill what we should have done on one bill. What's the question? These are the so-called commissions charged for payments, including housing and communal services. You understand everything very well, colleagues, what I'm talking about, up to 7%, Vladimir Vladimirovich. Many, we thought. The path was passed quite energetically, but we ran into a consolidated position, first of all, of banks. We understand that it is not easy for everyone now, but for people who pay payments, such amounts are 7%. Now I am speaking in the presence of you and your colleagues. We would like to raise the question, if not about abolition, we understand that all this must be ensured, but about a significant reduction. 7%. 7% of the person paid for housing and communal services. These are big payments, right? In any case, today we are all in this position in our faction stand. I think our colleagues will also support us. Taking this opportunity, I would probably also like to mention one very important point: the Russian world. You once said, speaking about our interethnic society, sorry, I may not reproduce exactly, that you are Chechen. Ingushin began to name other nationalities. For me it is very clear. Thanks for saying that. I looked after that and asked the Ministry of Defense and colleagues what the national composition of those who perform heroic deeds, manifest themselves on the battlefield. These are dozens of nationalities. Practically now, it has turned out that the nationalists and banderists, as my comrades said, and I share this turn of phrase, are at war with the multinational people of Russia, and the nationalities of the peoples of Russia have stood in their way and demonstrate exceptional heroism. This is a huge power. In this regard, colleagues, I would now like to support what we already understand, that there is probably no need to compete strongly between our factions in terms of who brought more than what to Donbass. Gennady Andreevich speaks about 19,000 tons, we are talking about something else. We have already agreed, maybe we should gather in one convoy more often, lay it down, and let it be from several factions. Another important detail. Recently I saw a white Kamaz, on it was written, Armenians of Russia, Donbass. It seems to me that it will also be possible to think carefully about this, because our people are multinational, multi-confessional. People really want to help their sons. By the way, now it has become a good practice when the Ministry of Defense and you also promptly mark our heroes. It does not say about nationalities, but many understand everything right away. Therefore, it seems to me that this moment could also be used by us. And finally, since time is limited, I would like to once again thank the colleagues with whom we work. It happens sometimes with us, and you know about it, and there is a certain tension, but we always find a common understanding. Why? Because exactly what you said, we have one country and people, and the president too. Thank you. Thank you very much. Some colleagues noted that our special military operation leads to the strengthening of our sovereignty, and this is true. But the beginning of this operation was not connected with this goal, it is a side effect, inevitable, but the side effect. The main goal, as I said, is to protect the Donbass and strengthen the security of Russia itself. What would you like to ask? You communicate directly with people, with your voters. We are doing everything we need to do, supporting the armed forces, but I want to emphasize once again that our guys who perform combat missions there are truly real heroes. What I would like to draw attention to, after all, the country lives an ordinary peaceful life, summer, the holiday season, cultural life, exhibitions, and the guys plow there under bullets, you understand. They risk their lives and lose their comrades in battle for the sake of the motherland. Why am I addressing you, the deputies? Consolidation of society is very important, but we need a nationwide agenda to support the armed forces. It is extremely important that our soldiers feel this support. This will give them strength. And this is very important to achieve the final result. It will be achieved in any case, there is no doubt about it. But it will be easier for the guys to work, to carry out combat missions, if they feel behind their backs the support and breath of the motherland, the support of our people. With regard to social and economic issues, the agenda was extremely rich and in high demand. Here, colleagues said, in fact, maybe there would be no happiness, but misfortune helped in some industries, in some sectors of the economy. And it's good that someone left our market. It's bad that there may be less competition, but we need to work to maintain internal competition. If internal competition is ensured, then both the quality and prices of goods will be at the proper level. And everything that has been happening lately shows that the fundamental, basic foundations of the Russian economy have turned out to be much more stable than our ill-wishers over the hill thought about it. But a lot will depend on you and me, on you, on the Deputy Corp, in the near future to maintain our economy, social sphere, to maintain the required number of jobs and to give a new impetus to the development of our country in all its directions, in all important areas. I would like to thank you again for your joint work and express the hope that we will continue to work in such a consolidated manner. All the best. Thanks a lot.